March 4th, 1998. The small farming town of Dane, Wisconsin, is the type of place where everyone is familiar with one another, and the church is at the heart of the community. For decades, St. Michael Catholic Church was a place of refuge, tradition, and unwavering faith. But on this fateful day, everything changed. Inside the modest rectory attached to the church school, a gruesome scene awaited. Father Alfred Kuntz, a beloved and controversial priest, lay dead on the cold, hard floor, his throat brutally slashed. The murder sent shockwaves through Dane and the Catholic community far beyond. Who could commit such a violent act against a man of God? But as investigators dug deeper, what they found was far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. Whispers of betrayal, corruption, and long-buried secrets that some say cost Father Kuntz his life. Was this murder a personal act of vengeance? Or was Father Kuntz silenced because he knew something? Something the church didn't want the world to know? To understand why Father Alfred Kuntz's life ended so violently, we must first understand the man, his mission, and the shadowy forces he confronted. This is the story of a Christmas church scandal that turned deadly. Father Alfred Kuntz was no ordinary priest. In the heart of Dane, Wisconsin, a small, close-knit farming town, Father Kuntz had served faithfully for over 3 decades. St. Michael Catholic Church was his home, his mission, and the center of his life. Known for his unwavering devotion to the traditional teachings of the Catholic Church, Father Kuntz earned the respect of many parishioners, but also the ire of those who disagreed with his strict ways. Born on April 15, 1930, Alfred Joseph Kuntz grew up with strong values, shaped by his faith in the farming community he came from. He was ordained in 1956, dedicating his life to God and the Church. By 1967, he had arrived at St. Michael Catholic Church, where he quickly became a cornerstone of the parish. Father Kuntz was a vocal advocate for Latin Mass, a centuries-old tradition many priests had abandoned after Vatican II. To those who shared his views, Father Kuntz was a man of courage, a priest unafraid to speak against the modern changes sweeping through the church. He was described as compassionate and deeply devoted to his flock, but to others, his firm traditional stance and unwillingness to compromise made him a controversial figure. Over the years, he gained not only allies but powerful enemies. As the winter of 1997 turned toward Christmas, whispers began to surface. Whispers of something wrong, something lurking beneath the surface of the church's leadership. Rumors suggested that Father Kuntz had been investigating corruption. Some believed he had uncovered financial misdeeds, while others thought his inquiries led him to far darker secrets involving abuse within church circles. Then came March 4th, 1998. It was a cold Wednesday morning. Father Kuntz had spent the evening before helping record a Catholic radio broadcast, a regular commitment for the priest who never shied away from defending his beliefs publicly. He was last seen alive around 10 p.m. that night, walking the quiet halls of St. Michael's Church School. The following morning, a janitor arrived at the parish school just as the sun began to rise. Inside, he made a horrific discovery. Father Kuntz's body was lying in the hallway near his office, a stark and chilling scene. His throat had been slashed with what investigators believed to be a sharp-edged weapon. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the cold tile floor. There were no signs of forced entry, no clear struggle. It was as if whoever had done this knew exactly how to find him. The town of Dane was thrown into turmoil. How could something so brutal happen in such a peaceful place, and to a man so dedicated to his faith? Father Kuntz was more than just a priest to this community. He was their spiritual guide, their confidant, their connection to God. He was always there for us, one parishioner said. I can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt him. But as the police arrived and investigators began piecing together the clues, the questions mounted. Who could have carried out such a violent act? Was this a random killing, or had Father Kuntz's rumored investigations put him in danger? And if so, what had he uncovered that was worth taking his life? This was no ordinary crime, and for the investigators, the search for Father Kuntz's killer would prove to be anything but simple. March 4th, 1998. It was a quiet Wednesday morning in Dane, Wisconsin. The sun had not yet fully risen over the rural town as staff began to arrive at St. Michael Catholic School. For most, it was expected to be another routine day. Students preparing for their lessons, teachers reviewing their plans, but that day would be anything but ordinary. The janitor was the first to enter the building. He had started his morning early, cleaning classrooms before the children arrived. But as he approached the school hallway near Father Kunz's office, something stopped him in his tracks. The hallway was unusually still, too still, and then he saw it. On the floor just outside his office door lay Father Alfred Kunz. He was sprawled lifeless on the cold tile. His throat had been cut. Blood surrounded him, forming a dark pool that stained the floor beneath him. The air was heavy, the metallic smell unmistakable. The sight was something out of a nightmare no one expected to find in the halls of a church school. The janitor immediately called for help, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. Moments later, Dane's local law enforcement arrived at the scene. The officers were met with a sight they would never forget. Father Kunz's lifeless body showed signs of a swift and brutal attack. The wound to his neck was clean, calculated, almost surgical. There were no signs of a struggle, no shattered furniture, and no forced entry. It was as if the killer had moved in and out without a trace, leaving behind nothing but horror. News of the murder spread quickly through the town. St. Michael's Church, once a haven for the faithful, had become the epicenter of fear and speculation. Parishioners, many of whom had known Father Kunz for decades, were stunned. This was a small, tight-knit community. Violent crime was unheard of here, let alone the murder of a beloved priest. Questions began to swirl. Who would kill a priest? And why? Investigators combed through the crime scene, searching for answers. But the evidence was disturbingly thin. There was no sign of robbery. Father Kunz's office appeared untouched, his personal items undisturbed. Nothing had been taken, and there were no indications of a struggle, suggesting that Father Kunz may have known his killer. Whoever did this was precise, careful, and very deliberate. As the investigation began, police were met with mounting frustration. The crime scene gave up a few clues. There were no fingerprints, no clear signs of forced entry. The hallways were eerily clean, as if the killer had known how to avoid leaving a trace. Investigators considered every possibility. Was this a robbery gone wrong? A personal vendetta? Or could it be something far more sinister? While law enforcement worked tirelessly to make sense of the crime, the town of Dane was left in a state of disbelief. St. Michael's had always been a sanctuary, a place of peace and trust. But now fear has taken hold. Parishioners began to whisper among themselves, their conversations filled with questions no one could answer. Who would want Father Kunz dead? And more chillingly, what was the motive? Father Kunz was a man of deep conviction. He was known for his outspoken defense of the Catholic Church's traditions, his loyalty to the Latin Mass, and his willingness to challenge those in positions of power. But those same qualities that earned him admiration may also have placed a target on his back. With no clear leads and a murder so shocking, rumors began to spread. Some whispered about hidden scandals within the church. Others believed Father Kunz's investigation into corruption had uncovered something dangerous, something worth killing to keep hidden. Whatever the case, fear and speculation now clouded the community. St. Michael's Church, once the heart of Dane, had become a place shrouded in darkness. For investigators, the clock was ticking. A beloved priest was dead, and a killer was still out there. The quiet halls of St. Michael's School now held a chilling silence, a silence that seemed to demand answers. But what investigators would uncover next would deepen the mystery even further and raise questions no one in Dane was prepared to face. As the investigation continued, the town of Dane began to reveal something darker beneath the surface. Father Alfred Kunz wasn't just any priest. He had been a man caught up in a series of controversies that many in the community were only beginning to understand. The longer law enforcement looked into the murder, the more it became clear that this was no ordinary crime. Kunz had been a man who made both allies and enemies in equal measure. Investigators turned their attention to those closest to Father Kunz, his fellow priests, church officials, and even members of the local community who had worked with him. They questioned everyone, from those who had known him for years to those who might have had something to gain from silencing him. One name that kept coming up was Monsignor John Feeney, a high-ranking church official at St. Michael's. He had worked closely with Father Kunz for years. Some said their relationship had been rocky, with Feeney and Kunz often clashing over church policies in the direction of the parish. While Feeney denied any involvement in the murder, his position as one of the higher-ups made him a figure of interest. Feeney was known for his traditionalist stance, much like Kunz. But some believed the two men had begun to disagree on important matters, particularly when it came to the future of the church. Did this disagreement go beyond ideology? Was there something more personal at play? But it wasn't just internal church politics that had made Father Kunz a target. A shadow had been cast over the priesthood for years, one that Kunz had been determined to bring into the light. Rumors had circulated for months that Kunz was uncovering a disturbing pattern of abuse within the church. There were whispers of young parishioners coming forward with allegations, stories of mistreatment, and the silence that followed. Father Kunz, known for his unwavering commitment to justice, had been trying to help these victims find a voice. He had been working with a group of survivors, victims of clergy abuse, who were determined to expose the truth. Kunz had spoken privately to close associates, telling them that he believed there was more to be uncovered, more corruption and harm hidden within the church walls. Could Kunz's efforts to bring justice to the victims of abuse have made him a target for those who had something to lose? Father Kunz was reported to have uncovered financial misconduct as well. There were rumors of mismanaged church funds, funds that were intended for charitable purposes, but had been diverted elsewhere. Those who worked alongside him knew he was determined to expose the truth, and some believed he had already uncovered enough evidence to bring down some powerful figures in the church. For a man who held such strong moral convictions, Kunz had made enemies not only within the church, but also in the town itself. But the suspicions surrounding Kunz's death didn't stop there. While some saw him as a hero, someone who had taken a stand against the corruption that had been festering within the church for years, others viewed him as a deeply polarizing figure. His outspoken nature, combined with his relentless pursuit of justice, had earned him both loyal followers and vocal detractors. For every person who admired him, there seemed to be another who despised him. Some parishioners felt that Kunz had gone too far. His efforts to challenge the hierarchy of the church had ruffled more than a few feathers. His outspoken stance on controversial issues had caused friction, not only within the church, but also among the community's more conservative members. Could this division have played a role in his tragic end? In fact, some sources close to Father Kunz claimed that he had sensed something dangerous was coming. In the weeks before his death, Kunz had reportedly confided in a close friend. He was known to have said, "I fear something is going to happen." His words now hang in the air, a haunting premonition. Was this simply an expression of concern, or did he know more than he was letting on? Some believed Kunz's fear was tied to the growing threats from those who wished to keep their secrets hidden. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous his position became. If the accusations of financial corruption and abuse were true, then Kunz had not only exposed a moral crisis, but also potentially threatened the power and influence of those at the top of the church's hierarchy. Who had the most to lose if Kunz succeeded in exposing the truth? Could the killer have been someone who feared that Kunz's revelations would unravel everything? Or could it have been a personal vendetta, someone with a deeply personal connection to the priest, someone whose motives were much more complex than anyone could have imagined? The investigation was far from over. Each piece of the puzzle raised more questions than answers, and the list of suspects continued to grow. As the town of Dane wrestled with the legacy of Father Alfred Kunz, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary murder, and the truth behind it might be darker than anyone could have predicted. Despite the intense investigation that followed the shocking murder of Father Alfred Kunz, the case quickly began to unravel in unexpected ways. Local law enforcement, determined to bring justice, found themselves struggling at every turn. No stone was left unturned, and yet the clues were few and far between. As the days passed, the case became more complex, and the truth seems farther away than ever. One of the greatest obstacles investigators faced was the absence of any solid leads. The murder weapon, what had been used to slit Father Kunz's throat, was never found. No fingerprints were left behind. The crime scene revealed nothing about the identity of the killer except for one chilling detail. There were no signs of a struggle. It was as though Kunz knew his attacker or had been caught off guard in a place he considered safe. As investigators combed through Father Kunz's life, they began to uncover something even more disturbing. The priest, in the months leading up to his death, had been warning others about a dangerous web of corruption, an intricate network of criminal activity that allegedly involved high-ranking clergy members. Kunz had reportedly been investigating allegations of abuse and financial misconduct within the church, and he had been determined to uncover the truth. Could this have been the very thing that led to his demise? Had Kunz dug too deep, exposing a truth that was meant to stay hidden? The revelations of Kunz's investigation raised even more questions. Was his murder an act of vengeance from someone he had once counseled? Perhaps there was someone in the priest's past, someone he had tried to help, who had turned on him in a moment of rage. The idea that this could have been a personal revenge sparked some interest among the investigators. Could someone who had been helped by Father Kunz have turned on him when he was most vulnerable? Another theory that gained traction was the possibility that Father Kunz's murder was a deliberate cover-up, a calculated attempt to silence his investigation into the church's deep-rooted corruption and abuse. Many in the town were beginning to believe that Kunz had uncovered too much. So much, in fact, that those who had the power to protect their secrets would stop at nothing to ensure that his efforts were erased. Some believed that Father Kunz's insistence on exposing the truth about abuse within the church made him a target for those with the most to lose. If his investigation had gained too much momentum, perhaps someone high in the church hierarchy had decided that Kunz had to be stopped permanently. Was this a murder to cover up decades of hidden crimes? The investigation hit several roadblocks, and soon the case began to grow cold. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, an unexpected twist surfaced. Years later, a parish member came forward with an unsettling revelation. They had heard strange noises on the night of Father Kunz's murder. The witness claimed to have heard what sounded like muffled voices and footsteps near the church, possibly even the sound of a struggle. Could this be the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for? Could this witness's testimony point to a more sinister motive or provide clues to the killer's identity? Despite the chilling detail, this lead quickly fizzled out. Investigators were never able to find any tangible evidence to support the claim. The mystery remained unsolved, with the strange noises only adding to the list of unconfirmed theories. With every turn, it seemed the case slipped further into the shadows. The twists and turns of the investigation raised more questions than answers. Was the murder truly tied to a web of corruption and abuse? Or was it something more personal, an act of revenge that was hidden behind a much larger veil of secrecy? As the years passed and the case grew colder, the townspeople of Dane, and even the investigators, were left to wonder if they would ever know the full truth of what had happened to Father Alfred Kunz. Father Kunz's death remains a mystery, his legacy entwined in the unresolved questions that continue to haunt Dane, Wisconsin. And as the investigation into his murder fades from the headlines, the truth behind his untimely death continues to elude both those who loved him and those who feared him. More than 2 decades have passed since the brutal murder of Father Alfred Kunz, and still, the case remains unsolved. The small town of Dane, once rocked by the death of their priest, has slowly moved on. But the questions left unanswered continue to linger in the shadows. Despite numerous investigations, countless interviews, and exhaustive attempts by law enforcement, no arrests have been made in the murder of Father Kunz. The leads have long since dried up, and the case file, once thick with hope, has become yet another cold case. A mystery that remains as chilling today as it was the day his body was discovered. The investigation uncovered a web of potential motives, from personal vendettas to the darker secrets that Father Kunz had been digging into within the church. Yet no one has been held accountable for his death. The murder weapon was never found. No fingerprints, no conclusive physical evidence. In the absence of answers, the town of Dane and the wider community are left wondering if the truth will ever emerge. For many in Dane, the murder of Father Kunz was a wake-up call. The man who had once been seen as a pillar of the community, a symbol of unwavering faith, had become entangled in something far more sinister. His death exposed a hidden underbelly of corruption, abuse, and betrayal within the very institution he had dedicated his life to. For those who had trusted the church, the scandal was a blow from which some would never recover. Some believed the truth, the full extent of Father Kuntz's investigation, lies buried with him. His secrets, hidden within the walls of the church, may never be revealed. Did Father Kuntz's pursuit of justice make him a target? Or was his death the tragic result of personal motives wrapped in a larger conspiracy? The answers, it seems, are locked away forever. To this day, Father Kuntz's case remains one of the most mysterious, unresolved church-related crimes in U.S. history. It has baffled investigators, haunted the community of Dane, and stirred deep questions about the dark realities lurking beneath the surface of religious institutions. The story of Father Kuntz is a tragic one, a story that many hope will eventually have closure. But the answers still elude us. Who killed Father Alfred Kuntz? What were they trying to protect? And why, after all these years, does the truth still remain so far out of reach? These are the questions that continue to haunt the small town of Dane, Wisconsin. And with each passing year, the mystery only grows deeper. Father Kuntz's murder may never be solved, but his story, one of faith, secrecy, and unresolved tragedy, will not be forgotten. The Christmas season, a time meant to bring peace and joy, instead became a tragic turning point for St. Michael's Church. The murder of Father Alfred Kuntz, his throat cut, his life taken, shattered the small town of Dane and exposed a scandal that many believed was buried long ago. Father Kuntz died under mysterious circumstances, but what exactly was he trying to protect? Or perhaps, what was he uncovering that led to his untimely death? Was Father Kuntz's murder simply a random act of violence, or was it something far more calculated, the desperate act of individuals determined to protect their own dark secrets? The case leaves us with many questions, questions that have remained unanswered for over 2 decades. And how many more stories like Father Kuntz's remain hidden within the walls of institutions we trust? How many more untold stories of abuse, corruption, and betrayal are waiting to be uncovered? The truth, in many cases, is not always what we expect it to be. Father Kuntz's murder serves as a haunting reminder. Sometimes the places we trust the most, the places meant to offer solace and security, can hold the darkest secrets. Thank you for joining us on this journey through mystery and tragedy. If you found this story compelling and wish to hear more about unsolved cases and hidden truths, be sure to subscribe to our channel for future investigations.